بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. Just pardon me everyone for my tardiness today. I just handled something that was important. Came up at the last minute. I had to tend to something. So as we continue in the next class, everyone, we know we have about 5 minutes left, not 3. So as we continue this tremendous treatise by the great Imam Abu Muhammad Abdullah Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani rahimahullah, rather it's the opposite, Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani rahimahullah, whose kunya was al-Malik al-Saghir, the little Imam al-Malik, who died 368 after the migration of our Prophet ﷺ, on this day of Safar, where it's the 7th of Safar, meaning the month of the Muharram, on this evening of Thursday, the year 1445 after the migration of our Prophet ﷺ. We continue in the chapter, everyone, of the affairs pertaining to what is obligatory, of the fundamentals of this religion, what is binding upon every Muslim to learn and be aware of and to firmly believe in. As you'll find, the title is بَابْ مَا تَنْطِقُ بِهِ الْأَلْسِنَةِ. We already talked about this. وَتَعْتَقِدُهُ الْأَفْئِدَةِ مِنْ وَاجِبِ أُمُورِ الدِّيَانَاتِ. The chapter of what the tongue utters and what the hearts firmly believe of the obligations of the affairs pertaining to the religion. We talked about the affairs pertaining to what everyone. We stopped at what Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani rahimahullah said about the matters of what? Min dhalik al-iman al-qalb. The affairs of iman, faith by the heart. And we talked about that there are certain affairs called قول القلب and عمل القلب. You have the statement of the heart and you have the actions of the heart. Like we said last class. The statement of the heart is the aqidah. The statement of the heart is the aqidah. And that all comes summarized in the hadith of Jibreel. The Prophet ﷺ clearly said, Al-Iman billah wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulihi wal yawm al-akhir. For example, the Prophet ﷺ, after Jibreel alayhi salam asked the Messenger of Allah what is Iman, and he said clearly what everyone. He said, do you believe in Allah, and tu'mina billah, and His angels, and His books, and His messengers, and the day of resurrection, and believe in the divine decree, the good of it and the evil of it, the good of it and the evil of it. That is qawlul qalb. That is the statement of the heart. So that is the affairs of belief. Then you have actions of the heart, amal al-qalb. That's what we talked about last class. Now, amal al-qalb is the affairs pertaining to khawf, wal-raja, wal-raghba, wal-rahba, wal-isti'ana, wal-istighatha, wal-luju, or al-isti'adha, to seek refuge in Allah, to hope for His mercy, to fear His punishment, and to seek their aid after afflictions, meaning relief technically, which is istighatha. During those great times of adversity, to seek relief is called istighatha. What we're trying to say is those are affairs of the a'mal qulub. Those are the actions of the heart. All those different types of worship are called the amal al-qalb or a'mal al-qalb, actions of the heart. Fine. What we mentioned last class, everyone, we said وَالنُّطْقْ بِاللِّسَانِ. وَالنُّطْقْ بِاللِّسَانِ, to utter or utterance those affairs with the testimony of La ilaha illallah. And that is, of course, the fundamental that validates and brings one to the fold of Islam. The utterance of La ilaha illallah. And, of course, in accordance to what the heart believes, believing of that affair, of being the truth, and what it means. So a person can't just utter upon the tongue, not knowing its meaning, and not knowing what it necessitates. And those affairs that become binding after you say it. All of those affairs, of course, connect. And if you want to say that they work hand in hand of the tongue and of the heart, and the affairs of the what? Of the limbs, meaning the actions. But anyway, what we stopped at last class, we're going to talk about this, don't worry, again, don't worry. That Allah is Ilahu Wahid. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is one. None has a right to be worshipped except Him. This is what we spoke about last class. This is where we stopped at. You'll find, everyone, that we said about the affairs of Nuh and Hud and Salih and Shu'aib, that the matters of calling the people to La ilaha illallah wasn't the issue in regards to the mushrikeen or the polytheists or those who had idolatry believed in. They believed in Allah's existence. They believed in Allah's actions. They believed that Allah deserved to be worshipped. However, the affair became when they said, illallah, except Allah. That's when the wars started and the altercations and the separation between the prophets and their people. When he called to mufasala tamma, meaning the prophets called to complete separation based upon that testimony. That's when the altercations and the separation became. Meaning that when the Prophet ﷺ said, La ilaha, they had no problem with that. None has the right to be worshipped. The problem was illallah, except Allah. When they heard that, that is where the problems emanated from, or stemmed from. So we said, if you look at La ilaha illallah, all throughout the Quran is mentioned in different ways. You'll find that it's mentioned similar to what we mentioned last class. An example of that, where it says, Ya qawmi i'budullah, ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh. As you'll find that the statement of the prophets and messengers when they embarked upon carrying out this great mission of establishing the monotheism of Allah and the unification of Allah and His worship alone, that those affairs had came of La ilaha illallah and other wordings. For example, O my people, u'budullah, ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh. You have no deity of worship other than Him. So, La ilaha illallah has been mentioned in the exact same statement. Ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh. You have no deity of worship. What's that, everyone? La ilaha. Other than Him, illallah. Illallah. So you find that La ilaha illallah all throughout the Quran is mentioned in different ways. Such as what I just mentioned now. I'll give an exact example. Ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh. You have no deity of worship other than Him. That's La ilaha. Ma lakum min ilah. La ilaha. Ma lakum min ilahin ghayruhu. Other than Him, illallah. Another example of that, which comes in Surah al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His book, وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah al-Baqarah, whoever disbelieves in the Taghut, which part of La ilaha illallah is that, everyone? La ilaha. وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ. That's La ilaha. وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ. They believe in Allah. What's that? Illallah. So you find all throughout the Quran how La ilaha illallah is mentioned in different ways upon the tongues of the prophets, such as the statement, مَا لَكُم مِّن إِلَهٍ غَيْرُ. We said those are the matters, the part of the testimony of La ilaha illallah, except Allah, is the affair where the mufasala tamma, the altercations between the prophets and their messengers started here, with that statement as we said last class. You'll find that Ahl-Ilm, that they said, for example, if the prophets would have just sufficed by saying La ilaha or u'budullah, worship Allah alone. And they did not say illallah or ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh, and they just sufficed by saying worship Allah. There would not have been any altercations. There would not have been any what? There would not have been any battles or wars between, of course, the prophets and their people, because all of them believe that they worship Allah. However, they worship Him in different ways where they associated partners with Him. As a result of it, the altercations and the division had started. And in actuality, it's not division. In actuality, it's purification, where the people of monotheism became distinct from the people of falsehood and the people of idolatry. But however, that type of purification didn't take place except by the statement, except Allah. Except Allah. Because like we talked about, the polytheists knew what La ilaha illallah meant and what it necessitated. They knew that they would have to totally separate themselves and detoxify themselves from anything that's associated with Allah as partners. And this is what we talked about last class. All of the affairs, for example, of the matters of magic, or the matters of worshiping the devils, worshiping the jinn, believing in omens, superstitions, bad luck, myths, superstitions, and the other deities that they used to worship along with Allah. They knew that they would have to totally separate and purify and detoxify themselves from all of those matters. That's what they did not want to rid themselves of. Even in the affairs of politics, they knew that they could not make man-made laws or take their affairs back to the magicians or the fortune tellers and soothsayers and the crystal ball readers. Well, back then they were in the different ways. But the people who claim to have knowledge of the unseen, they could not take their affairs back to them anymore. All of the affairs, all these type of polytheistic, devilish type matters had to be totally what? Eradicated. That's why the wars broke out between the prophets and their people. They knew they would have to rid themselves of the idols that were in the form of images, pictures, and all those matters that they used to what? Worship along with Allah. Even the statues and the pictures and images of the righteous. All of them had to be demolished and destroyed. So the polytheists during the time of the Message of Allah knew what it necessitated. They knew what it meant, and they knew the affairs that were binding as a result of them uttering this kalima, uttering this word of truth, which is La ilaha illallah. Similar to that, the affairs of politics, they knew they could not come up with their own type of legislations anymore that were man-made. That it could not be man-made laws anymore. That they had to refer their affairs back to Allah and how they would govern and run their lands. That those legislations are only for Allah. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislates the most important of the affairs of human beings. Not only did Allah send down revelation of teaching the people of the reason of why they were created, but the most important of affairs, Allah sent down the most greatest of details in regards to it. From them is worship. From them is tawheed and what shirk is. From them is from the affairs of prayer and purification. And from them is knowing how to run the land. And the land in which the people run their daily affairs of the society that they live in. Those affairs have to be known, and Allah sent down details in regards to the leaders of how to run their lands. Because they're the most important of affairs. How people and how the lands are ran and governed, and by the laws that they have to live by in order to live in harmony where people are not oppressed. Economically, socially, or in any type of level. What there is. And Allah sent down clear details in that regard, that not only the people worship Him in regards to them individually, but even in their daily affairs of their lands and how to reign. And those affairs are also from the affairs of La ilaha illallah. That the affairs or the legislations go back to Allah. Those polytheists, a lot of them knew that. They knew that if we was to utter this word, we could not make man-made laws anymore. All those affairs have to refer back to Allah. And Allah is the one that sends down the legislations of how to run the land. That's the reason why society is collapsing now, because of man-made laws. And that the perfect legislation in which Allah sent down is the most perfect affairs of what will bring about rectification for any society. The polytheists during the time of the Message of Allah knew that. That's why a lot of them they didn't utter it, because they knew what would have to be had to be implemented and executed as a result of them uttering this word, La ilaha illallah. They knew they would have to rid themselves of magic. They knew they would have to rid themselves of rid themselves of murder and of wars pertaining to tribes. They knew that all these matters would have to stop. Affairs that so-called made them greedy and devour the weak, where the strong would devour the weak. A lot of them wanted power, so they wanted to stay in power. So they knew if they was to utter that word, La ilaha illallah, all these affairs would stop, because they knew what was binding. So that is the reason why the wars broke out between the prophets and the messengers, because of this matter. So that's the reason why, in summary, we wanted to say or clarify, La ilaha is not enough. You have to say illallah, except Allah. And one has to realize what is binding when you utter that testimony. What is binding is a lot of affairs. And like we just gave the examples of some of them, that you have to relinquish yourself of magic, relinquish yourself of belief in omens, bad luck, superstitions, affairs as pertaining to having knowledge of the unseen, referring your affairs back to people who claim to have knowledge of the unseen, referring your affairs back to the devil worshippers, or all the other religions that are polytheistic religions, or previously revealed books from Allah that became distorted and and altered. When you utter La ilaha illallah, those matters have to be left off. Other than that, if one still remains upon those beliefs, it will either nullify their testimony of La ilaha illallah, or it will render it severely weak. And those matters are very extremely dangerous. So that's the reason why you'll find that the great Imam Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, he opened up the book by saying that everyone, if you read in Islam, what did he say? Allaha ilahu wahid. La ilaha ghayru. Wa la shabiha lah. So you'll find that he started it off by By saying that one has to testify that La ilaha illallah, that there's no deity worthy worship in truth other than him. So everyone, this is very important for the Muslims, that the affairs of man-made laws are to be avoided. They're extremely dangerous. The affairs of man-made laws and being involved in those matters could put a very, very great detriment upon your testimony. Especially to believe that man-made laws are better than the laws or the legislations that Allah sent down. If you believe those matters are equal or better than Allah or better than the legislations of Allah, that could nullify your Islam. The affair revolves around something extremely dangerous. The matters in which is binding upon the Muslims in order to restore the power and the glory and the honor is to go back to the affairs of what we're talking about right now and what we're teaching right now. It's to go back to those matters and implement it. Once those matters have been implemented, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant victory and restore the domination and the power of the Muslims as it was before. As we know, the last of this ummah will never be rectified except will rectify the first of it. ما يصلح وما يصلح آخر هذه الأمة إلا بما صلحت بها أولها. The last of this ummah will not be rectified except will rectify the first of it. So anyone that try to take on another affair other than what rectified the first of it will find that matter will not benefit the Muslims. Rather, it will increase them in more turmoil and more humiliation. Right. So let's go to the next part and then we'll stop. Inshallah, we'll talk about the next matter. So then he goes on to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala la shabiha lahu wa la nadhir lah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is nothing that resembles him And there's nothing similar to him. Al-Shabih, if you look in your books, everyone, وَلَا شَبِيهَ لَهُ. Shabih. Shabih means there's no one that resembles Allah. No one resembles Allah, everyone, not in his essence, not in his actions, not in his names after the idafa, and I'll explain that. And nothing resembles Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his characteristics. Nothing resembles him. Not in his actions, not in his essence. What do I mean by his essence? Meaning Allah himself. No one resembles Allah. Nothing. Is there anything that doesn't have a beginning? The only one that doesn't have a beginning is Allah. Allah has no beginning. And Allah has no ending. And Allah's knowledge is not preceded by ignorance. No one resembles Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that affair, right? So you'll find that the affair of what? Al-Shabih. No one resembles Allah, not in his la fi dhatihi, wa la fi sifatihi, wa la fi asma'ihi, wa la fi af'alihi. No one resembles Allah, not in his essence, not in his names, except in the general meaning, which we'll talk about. That's before the idafa. I'll talk about that in a minute. Not in his names, not in his attributes, not in his essence, nor in his actions. No one resembles Allah. No one can hear everything simultaneously, except Allah. No one can see everything simultaneously, or nothing escapes his knowledge, except Allah. No one resembles Allah in that affair. No one resembles Allah in his actions. The actions, for example, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always above the creation. Even when Allah descends, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still above. Those affairs are only for the Creator. Brothers and sisters, no one resembles Allah in those actions. Those are the matters you'll find that Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani rahimahullah is mentioning here. That there's no shabih for Allah. There's no resemblance for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, you'll find the affairs of shabih breaks down to two categories. You'll find who resembles Allah with the creation, who resembles the creation with Allah. I'll say one of the two categories, I'll say quickly, and then we'll explain it, and then we'll stop. Resembling Allah with the creation and resemble the creation with Allah. Is there any difference between the two statements? Yes. The first one is resembling the creation with Allah. How is that? That is in regards to the names and attributes of Allah. Or if you want to say, I'm sorry everyone, من شبه الله بالمخلوق وشبه المخلوق بالخالق. I'm sorry everyone. Resembling the creation with Allah. Resembling the creation with Allah is polytheism. Resembling the creation with Allah is polytheism. That's exactly what polytheism is. How? When you supplicate and raise your hands, and you say, oh, Jesus, the Son of Mary, rectify my life. Allow my wife to get pregnant. Remove from me my endeavors or change the course of my life for the better. And the harms that I'm being tested with, make it easy for me, facilitate it for me. That's a dua. If you ask the creation, it's as if you're saying that thing is all hearing, all seeing, has the power to remove it, has the power to change it, and has an effect and impact on my life. That's only for Allah. You resemble the creation with Allah. Well, Allah is the only one that can do that. He's the only one that can answer your supplication, change the course and direction of your life for the better, remove those difficulties and those adverse affairs that you're facing and change it and give you relief. If you ask anyone other than Allah in those matters, you have resembled the creation with Allah. Whereas if you say, oh, such and such from the creation, you're all hearing, you're all seeing, you hear my supplication, answer it. That's resemblance of the creation with Allah. Now, what is the difference in resembling Allah with the creation? Resembling Allah with the creation is deviance in the names and attributes of Allah. When you say, for example, Allah's hand is like my hand. It looks like my hand. That is a type of tashbih. Resembling Allah with the creation is like saying Allah's face is like my face. Allah's hand is like my hand. Allah's sight is like my sight. That is resemblance of the Creator with the creation, which is what they call deviation in the affairs of the names and attributes of Allah. So just to sum it up, we'll stop here. Resembling the creation with Allah is what, everyone? That's polytheism, it's shirk. When you resemble the creation with Allah is polytheism. That's exactly what polytheism is. And when you resemble the Creator with the creation, that's what? Deviation in the names and attributes of Allah. Generally, all those affairs are kufr. All of them. However, the affairs of polytheism nullifies Islam. Generally, the hukum is your Islam is nullified. If you supplicate to other than Allah, asking for these affairs, for your life to be better after it became in a state of adversity or great adversity or difficulty, and you raise your hands, supplicating to the creation, no matter who it is, whether it be a person righteous or wretched, doesn't matter, or asking the angels, or asking the prophets. If you ask them, these are the affairs that the prophets came to make war with and to eradicate and decimate in its totality. This type of belief. And despite of that, you'll find that the Muslims partake in this, forgetting what the meaning of La ilaha illallah means. And that the fact there's nothing that resembles Allah and the creation, what it means. They forgot, to the point they fell into affairs that the prophets and the messengers came to destroy. And to connect the creation with their Creator without any mediators, intercessors, or anyone that resembles Allah in those affairs. As a result, Allah's anger and wrath descended upon the creation. And now the affairs is in the state that you see that it's in now. It's very detrimental and it's very what? Critical. This is what you see. So, when the great Imam Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah. So now we just gave a little glimpse of what the affair necessitates. And I wanted to apologize to everyone online. Like I said, I had to attend to something today, and I came up a little late, so pardon me for today, everyone. Next week I'll be on time for the class. But the last thing is, you'll find that the great Imam that he goes on to say, he said, La ilaha ghayru, la ilaha illallah, wa la ilaha ghayru, wa la shabiha lah, wa la nadhira lah. There's none that has the right to be worshipped other than him. So keep in mind, those listening online, when you say La ilaha illallah, that necessitates you have to abandon everything and every type of polytheism. Meaning, you cannot believe in superstitions anymore. You cannot believe in bad luck anymore. You cannot practice magic anymore. You cannot believe in superstitions and myths anymore. You cannot believe in zodiac signs anymore. You cannot believe that I can manifest something in reality or manifest something into existence by how my mind focuses and tuning into that thing until I can bring it or utter it into existence. Those affairs are all from the polytheistic matters that when you say La ilaha illallah is binding upon you to detoxify yourself from those affairs. You cannot believe that man-made laws are better than Allah's legislation. That's also polytheism. Man-made laws, also, if you believe that those laws are better than what Allah legislates, that nullifies your Islam. Your Islam is nullified. Those are the matters that that the prophets came in order to what? Eradicate. Also the worship of the devil, the worship of polytheistic practices in religions. All those matters are polytheism, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in his book, if one was to die upon it, that he would not forgive it, if he was to die upon it. All those matters of kufr pertaining to atheism, or being agnosticism, or being an agnostic. All those matters are matters of polytheism in the most lowest forms, in the worst forms. Because there's no way that a person can disbelieve in Allah. It's extremely strange to disbelieve in the existence of the one who created you. Rather, it's the opposite. Back in the times, the polytheists believed in Allah. Now, these days and times, we live in times where people have totally lost their intelligence and embarked upon just being extremely people who are weird. To a point where females are males and you can just think in your mind you become the opposite sex, which is extremely weird. Things that are unheard of and unprecedented. And the fact that these are the affairs that think this is going to rectify society, rather it's going to be the reason for its downfall. So those are the matters, brothers and sisters, that we wanted to speak about. And like we said, we'll continue next week. Is there any questions about the lessons? We can pray, Mother. Any questions? Tafadhal, Kadeem.
How would you advise somebody who doesn't necessarily focus on this foundation to the point where they say that they have no type of connection to Islam, or they feel like a weak connection with the Creator? How would you advise somebody?
That's the problem. Because the problem within the question. The answer was answered inside the question. They have a weak connection in their foundation. You have a weak connection or weak knowledge of your foundation without the implementation of it, you're going to be a weak Muslim. There's no Muslim out there that does not have the monotheism of Allah deeply within, if you want to say, the genetics of the Muslim. Those affairs of fundamentals has to be in your veins, running through like the blood in your veins. The genetics of a Muslim Sunni Salafi is the establishment of the Tawheed of Allah within their bloodstream. There's no Muslim out there that cannot have the affairs of Tawheed running through their veins, except that individual is bound to either resort back to disbelief or apostate or be Muslim by culture, not because they firmly believe it, which is also extremely dangerous. You cannot believe that Islam is the truth culturally. You have to have knowledge of what you're upon. It's unacceptable for you to be a Muslim culturally. It's unacceptable. Because the angels in the grave are going to ask you the question, وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ. They're going to ask you the question, and some of the questions in the grave, where the angels would say, what will make you know this matter? That the angels are going to ask that question in the grave. Meaning, the angels are asking you this question, what substantiates your claim that what you're saying is the truth? Are you saying it culturally, or are you saying based upon knowledge that you learned and you implemented it? That's basically what they're going to test you. Meaning you cannot say that's just based upon it being tradition, cultural, or is this something that my mothers or my ancestors or my forefathers or my great, that they used to practice. I know this because what gave me surety in this affair is the knowledge that I learned. I don't care about culture. I care about is the knowledge that I learned, that this is Kitab and Sunnah that I learned in the classes that I'm implementing, and that's what makes me say this affair based upon surety or upon surety. That's what the angels are going to test you upon. The angels are going to test you. Are you saying this culturally, or are you saying this because you truly believe it? And then they're going to ask you, what substantiates it? You're going to say, the knowledge that I learned, the ilm. The knowledge, the ilm that I learned of Tawheed, of monotheism, gave me the surety that what I'm uttering was not just a traditional practice, nor was it a cultural practice. It was something that I truly, firmly believe is the haqq. And the angels are going to test you based upon that. Based upon what? The knowledge. That's what they want to see. You learned it, or you just saying it because your mom used to do it? You understand? So those affairs is what makes a person weak. There's no one that learns the fundamentals in the religion except they're going to be a weak Muslim. They're going to either be subjected to doubt, a Muslim culture, or they're going to apostate with al-iyadhu billah, or they're going to what? Be doubtful. Or they might abandon Islam altogether. You cannot be a Muslim that does not start with these affairs. If you do not start with these matters, if your fundamentals are weak, there's nothing in this dunya. You can imagine everyone, even if it's affairs of worldly things that you have. If the fundamental basis is weak, it's not going to be strong. That's even in a car. That's even in a house. That's even in a building. If it's not built upon a strong foundation, what happens? Fall apart. And how many people from the Muslims you see that they not only stay away from this matter, they even make war against it. And then they wonder why their communities are falling apart. You get it? Then those other masajid that don't teach these fairs, they telling this is the answer to the problems in your community. And then not only, like you said, not only are they not teaching it, they're making war against it. And then they wonder why, like we said, the whole communities are falling apart. You understand? So that Muslim who's this weak, you have to tell them you have to learn your fundamentals. If you don't learn your fundamentals, you're going to be weak. A car, if it's not built upon a strong foundation, a house is not built upon a strong foundation, even a computer, this foundation has to be built upon. If it's not there, it's not going to work. Even a chair, if it's not built upon these legs under it, even a table, same thing. Table, what holds it up? Something strong. It gave it firm fundamentals. If it holds it up. If that's weak, what's going to happen? It's going to fall apart. So we'll stop here, inshallah. Anything else? وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.